Welcome back to the Corral. Are you the type of reader that can't put a book down when you're really enjoying it? I'm that type of reader. And when I discover books that I really like, I kind of get fanatical about it, and I try to find more by the same author. So today we're going to talk about an author who never existed as a living person, but he did exist as multiple living people. And we're talking about Peter Saxon, and how Peter Saxon, the pen name, led me to a fictional character named Sexton Blake. And what did that all mean? Now, for my British viewers out there, you may have a better grasp on this than I do. This is a winding road tale that took place over many years, actually quite a few decades. And if anyone has information out there in the UK or anywhere that clarifies some of these titles better than I am going to do, then please use the comment section below and politely let me know what the facts are. There's a mystery involved in this, and let me explain. So as a Yank here in the United States, it begins here and then it ends up in England. Many years ago I read the first one I read by Peter Saxon was a paperback based upon the movie Scream and Scream Again, which was a Hammer film. Very good, creepy film. I don't have that paperback any longer. I don't know where it is. But it was credited to Peter Saxon. I never even considered Peter Saxon wasn't a real person. I had no clue. And then my next one was The Torturer, which is this book here. This is an American edition, Peter Saxon, a terrifying supernatural novel of undying evil. So, this was originally printed in 1967. This is the 1970 edition, and it is published here in the United States by Press Editorial. I don't know what that is. It's a paperback library, and it cost me 60 cents. I really loved this book when I read it, and I thought, this is great. You know, this Peter Saxon guy, I need to get more. So I was on the lookout for Peter Saxon, thinking he was a real man, because this is a chilling book. This book, by the way, holds up really well. I still am fond of this book. So that led me to The Darkest Night by Peter Saxon, and this is 50 cents for this one. And this book is equally as good, if not better, than The Torturer. And I'm in, right? I'm just like, okay, Peter Saxon, I gotta watch for those. So this goes on for years, you know. I'm paying 50 cents, 60 cents for a book. Then that leads me to The Vampire's Moon by Peter Saxon. What year was The Vampire's Moon? I think this had to be 70. And this is the Belmont out of New York edition. I actually have two editions. I think this is the 5-star UK edition of Vampire's Moon. This is one of the best vampire novels I've read. It's not a classic work of literature. It's a great work of entertainment fiction, pulp style fiction, pulp paperback fiction. Peter Saxon. Now it's like, this is great. I'm on the lookout. I think there's a third edition of this out there. I check eBay every couple of months looking to see if I can find a different covered edition of this. I'm so fond of this book. These are the only two I have so far. So Peter Saxon. I'm interested in Peter Saxon. Who is this guy? Well, we're not done yet. There were 3 of these war novels. World War I, Royal Flying Corps. This is The Unfeeling Sky, which is Peter Saxon again, and this is probably the early 70s. So The Unfeeling Sky, there was also The Warring Sky and The Enemy Sky, and this is copyrighted in 68, but it would have been 1970 edition. World War I aviation novel, riveting stuff. Peter Saxon. Now I'm a Peter Saxon fan by 1970. Okay, I'm into it. But we're not quite done yet, because then he has a little series that came out here, and these are probably out of order. Satan's Child by Peter Saxon, which is exactly what you think it is. thriller. Through the Dark Curtain, this involves a group called the Guardians. There are multiple Guardians books. This is published by Lancer, and I'm sure this is also late 60s, early 70s. Here in the United States, all of a sudden, Peter Saxon is a name to be reckoned with on the spinner rack with paperbacks that you're looking for. Curse of Wrathlaw, another Guardians novel. Peter Saxon, okay? I'm in, man. I am totally involved in Peter Saxon. Dark Ways to Death by Peter Saxon. The Guardians, this is actually the Guardians number 2. The Guardians fight devil worship, voodoo, and supernatural terror in this. What a great book. So you can see what happened. Here in the United States, it's Peter Saxon, right? Whoever he is. Then, somewhere along the way, I end up reading, here in the United States, some Sexton Blake novels. And the first one that I had was, number 3, was Every Man an Enemy by W. Howard Baker. Never heard of him. Who's W. Howard Baker? This is a McFadden Bartell book. These are the American editions. And that's a Peter Saxon, that is a Sexton Blake tale. Kind of a detective like James Bond. And the reason I'm reading these books is because I'm into James Bond, right? I've read Ian Fleming. I am a fan of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and I Spy with Robert Culp and Bill Cosby and blah, blah, blah. Sexton Blake by Wilfred McNeely. Okay, so I have these books, and this is actually 65. And The Witches of Notting Hill, this is not a very good book, by W.A. Ballinger. Sexton Blake, number 2. Right, so I'm familiar with the Sexton Blake character through those books, but I don't have a connection to Peter Saxon. I had no idea that there was even a connection to Peter Saxon. It wasn't until the 90s, early 90s, that I came across a reference somewhere in a journal or magazine, probably a fanzine I picked up somewhere, or talking to somebody at a convention, and Sexton Blake's name came up in conjunction with Peter Saxon, and that is when I learned that Peter Saxon was a pen name for W. Howard Baker and many others. It turns out that W. Howard Baker was part of the Peter Saxon, I get the two mixed up because they're one and the same person. The Sexton Blake Detective Digest being published over in England, which I had not yet read. So let me explain about Sexton Blake, all right? So Sexton Blake, there are reprints on this available of the early. Sexton Blake was created as a pastiche of Sherlock Holmes. He was created by, you can look this up, by multiple authors, and he first appeared in 1893 in pulps in England. And there have been now, over 200, maybe more, authors that have worked on Sexton Blake detective stories since that time. Sexton Blake was exclusively a Sherlock Holmes pastiche. So now I'm getting educated. I'm learning about it. This particular collection is from, this is from 2009, so it's not that old. This has an introduction by Michael Moorcock, who would be a factor in this soon. So I read these, and I still haven't read any of the Sexton Blake original digest. I only have this in 2006, so I'm behind the times on this, because here in the United States, it really wasn't until eBay took off and the internet that we began to purchase some of this material from overseas in a much easier fashion, click and pay. So if you're interested in the history of Sexton Blake, this is it. There are other compilations out there too. I think they were collected and edited by Mark Hodder, and we'll talk about him in a minute. So now I know Sexton Blake was a character that had many names associated with it, including Peter Saxon. that leads me in a roundabout, long and winding road to try and find some Sexton Blake digests. And I want, specifically to begin with, I want the Peter Saxon Sexton Blake digest, because I have to tell you why. The allure here is the style. These are writers that had to punch out an adventure story. These are the pros from the old days. Punch it out on their typewriters and make it work, right? Get the tale done. So, long story short, through eBay, I'm collecting Sexton Blake. Flight into Fear by Peter Saxon. Now, I have to pause here and give you the lowdown. Peter Saxon was a pen name created over there at Fleetway, I believe by W. Howard Baker, who was the editorial chief. If any of this information is wrong and you know more, let me know in the comments. And the stories were not always written, however, by one person. Sometimes W. Howard Baker would write a plot and he would dole it out to somebody. It could be some of his friends and writers that worked with him closely were people like Wilfred McNeely, who was out there, Martin Thomas, and I don't know, so many others. Michael Moorcock comes into play here. So anyways, I'm reading Sexton Blake. So now what happened in this? In the mid to late 50s, W. Howard Baker revamps the Sexton Blake character. He brings him in line with more of an Ian Fleming, James Bond type private eye character. He becomes a modern man of action. Sexton Blake is on Baker Street like Sherlock Holmes and all that, but he modernizes it and he becomes a much different character. Right? He's transformed. And these are the issues that I really took to when I started reading them. All right, so Flight into Fear. I showed you that one. Here's a really good one. White Mercenary, Peter Saxon, and these are, most of these are late 50s, early 60s. The Violent Hours, Tangier, City of Secrets, where men live by day and often die by night. And I'm really digging into Sexton Blake as a hip guy, you know. The Violent Ones, Hatred and Murder and Strife-Torn Cyprus. Peter Saxon's name comes up. So in my exploration of the Peter Saxon persona, which doesn't exist, and by the way, some of the pictures, they occasionally would print photographs. Here's one. Here's a photograph of Peter Saxon. That's W. Howard Baker, and that I know for sure because I've looked at pictures of W. Howard Baker and I've compared them. So the same picture, however, with alterations, it's W. Howard Baker, it's Peter Saxon. He is also W.A. Ballinger. Now there's some confusion here because W.A. Ballinger, I believe, is Wilfred McNeely, overseen by W. Howard Baker. Sometimes maybe they work together and sometimes other writers unknown to me would work on these tales. So W.A. Ballinger can be either W. Howard Baker or I think mostly, I'm guessing, Wilfred McNeely. I don't know. How about this one? Murder on Camera. This was a really fun one, too. I mean, these are all fun. These are all entertaining. I really love them. W. Howard Baker, one of the classics. Savage Venture. Look at this. Look at this beautiful stuff. I mean, and look at, these are digests. The British digest market, since I started buying these, I have become a fan. This Man Must Die. He was trapped between a girl he couldn't trust and a war he couldn't fight. W.A. Ballinger, a.k.a. W. Howard Baker, Wilfred McNeely, maybe some other guys. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. W. Howard Baker did get his own byline on some of these. The Reluctant Gunman. And how about The Big Smear? He's carrying a Luger, of course. This would be post-war Britain. Late 50s, early 60s. The Imposter by Philip Chambers and W. Howard Baker. So Philip Chambers gets a byline here. This photograph is actually a photograph of the British actor who played Sexton Blake on television. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. And I understand most of those episodes are lost. They weren't preserved. So Sexton Blake is big in England until the late 60s and 70s, he's really unknown here in the United States, unless you happen to visit England at that time. There are many, many others that I have. I have a good stack, and I have more. Just to show you a few, here's Roadhouse Girl by Desmond Reed. I don't know anything about Desmond Reed. And Murder by Moonlight by Desmond Reed. I mean, these are fantastic pulps. The Pulp Digests in England, any of them. I have a Robin Hood one, and I'm looking for more of those. Flashpoint for Treason by Desmond Reed. A lot of the same guys. Here's Arthur McLean, Deadline for Danger by Arthur McLean. And how about Consider Your Verdict by Rex Harding. And this, I love the covers, don't you? Where are the original covers for these? Some collector has them. How about Death and Little Girl Blue? Now this seems to be, this is by V.J. Hansen. Seems like we're getting more into a 60s look. Look at the hairdo on the girl. Crime of Violence by James Stagg. You know, I mean, on and on we go, and I'm devouring these. Walk in the Shadows by Rex Dolphin. This is a particularly great pulp style cover, just magnificent. Death in Small Doses by Martin Thomas. And how about Richard Williams, Speak Ill of the Dead? This looks more like a late 50s, early 60s. And sometimes it gives you the date on these, and sometimes they don't. I don't know if it does on here. Yeah, this is 1963. The Sound of Murder by Martin Thomas. Again, we have, I love Big Ben in the backdrop there, which, you know, and I'm just going to show you a few more because I know there's a lot of you interested in these covers, and maybe you'll track these down on eBay. The Slaying of Julian Summers by Richard Williams. Fun, fun, fun. The Girl Who Saw Too Much. And who wrote this one? And Desmond Reed, of course. The Girl Who Saw Too Much by Desmond Reed. And Cult of Darkness by Desmond Reed. And so on and on. So, Murder by Proxy. Here he really looks like a James Bond character. So we have all this going on. And I'm hooked. I want to know who Peter Saxon is, and I found out he's multiple people. So for my favorite paperbacks, I really have no way of knowing. There are numerous book dealers out there that have listings in their inventory for some of these books, and in parentheses they give who the author is, and sometimes it would be Wilfred McNeely, where other guys might say it's W. Howard Baker. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. We're not quite done yet. Because I enjoy, I'm an avid reader, as you longtime viewers have figured this out. I don't watch television. I collect books and sit there and read all day. And because I'm interested in this, and W. Howard Baker, by the way, has some books, post-war stories in paperback that I'm looking to acquire under his name. W. A. Ballinger, who I believe is either Wilfred McNeely or W. Howard Baker, or both, I don't know. This is an American edition of Call It Rhodesia. Guess what? This is a big, fat book, and it was really good. I mean, I'm glad I bought it. I paid next to nothing for it, and it's from 1966. Is this American edition or the British edition? I'm sorry, I should look. Yeah, this is the G.P. Putnam's. It's from that same group of writers. So Fleetway had really talented, incredible writers on there. There's more I could say about those. Some of them, you know, I could tell you about their backgrounds and what they did. They became famous under their names or other pen names and so forth. But just to give you a flavor of it is the purpose of this overlong episode. So, all right, I'm hooked. When I was in London, what was it now, 5 years ago, I picked up a stack of Sexton Blake. and I carried them back with me. One last thing. Michael Moorcock's first novel was a Sexton Blake story. And he just re-released it, slightly revised, or perhaps almost fully revised, with Mark Hodder, who is himself a superb writer. And it also has a little novella in the back, which is a prequel to this. Caribbean Crisis was Michael Moorcock's, I believe, his first published work. And finding the Sexton Blake Digest version of it is, if you find it, it's going to cost you a lot if they know what they have. So this just came out. It took me a long time, 2023. I had it on order on Amazon, and they kept delaying it and delaying it. 6 months went by. I couldn't get it, so I took it off I canceled the order, and I waited and another 6 months or a year, and I ordered it again when it was showing as being in stock, and I actually got it. So if you're interested in a Sexton Blake story written by one of the great masters of prose fiction adventure tales, Michael Moorcock, with Mark Hodder, who is also a great writer, and you should pick this up. Really entertaining, and this will be a good introduction for Sexton Blake as he became after the transformation from a Sherlock Holmes type character to more of an international man of intrigue. And gosh, that's a long episode, and I'm sorry. But it's exciting. It's fun. I am going back to the UK. I'm going to Scotland, though. This will be strictly a trip to Scotland. And I don't know if I'll find any or not. I will be looking for any of the Fleetway Digests in places that I visit. I have a list of bookstores to visit in Scotland when I'm there in just shy of a month. I'll be there. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this because it's a mystery. Anyone with information that can clarify specific titles, whatever, let me know. Who wrote Vampire's Moon? Who wrote The Darkest Night? Who wrote The Torturer? Was it W. Howard Baker? Was it Wilfred McNeely? Was it both of them? I don't know. Interesting to find out. It doesn't matter at the end of the day because I'm in with it. I have them. I will continue to look for them and read them. And this is overlong episode. My apologies. I want you to stay well, stay happy, feed your brain, read a book.